recording, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correct. Is it LaViolette?
Yes.
Dr. LaViolette, who I emailed you. There's a lecture of yours I've watched, I don't know how many times, probably over 100 times in the last several years, because I just think it's fascinating, about, for everyone listening, something called the Nausica superconducting thruster. And originally, listening to your lecture was the first time I'd ever heard of a xenon ion thruster. And I thought that was fascinating, about this very slow but consistent force that not enough to take off from a planet and get out of the gravity well, but over a long amount of time, able to, really get cooking. And you talked about the Nausica superconducting thruster. But for everyone listening, please introduce yourself.
Okay, what would you like to know? I'm director of the Starburst Foundation, which is a scientific research institute. I'm sort of counter standard views. I found over the years that a large percentage of what they teach in the universities is baloney. They just don't. You need to really question both the standard view and your own theories, rather than just blindly accepting what people in the past have said. Mm-hmm. So my PhD is in systems science. I have a BA in physics and a master's in business administration, which comes in handy because I run the Starburst Foundation and also have a sort of a business selling my books. I'm an author of 6 books, and I have a website which I can show you later. Called etheric.com, where I sell books. Also, there's free paper downloads both there and at the Starburst Foundation website, which is starburstfound.org. And I am the originator of the superwave theory, the galactic superwave theory. That's what I worked on for my PhD. And that was back in '83, I got the PhD. So there were a lot of predictions I made. Something like 12, 13 of the predictions that I made have been verified. Some with more recent space observations, because we had to wait this long, 35 years or so, until we had the technology available to put up satellites that could look in ultraviolet and so on to be able to see what's happening in other galaxies. And sure enough, exactly what I was saying, that explosions at the center of galaxies produce radial expansion of cosmic rays in all directions, not just actually like the previous theory had thought it would. They just go from the poles of the galaxy. And that they actually travel all the way out through the galaxy. And so they then, in the case of our own galaxy, core explosion would present a major hazard, which was totally oblivious to this at the time I was doing my dissertation. And that's why I formed the Starburst Foundation in 1984, a year after I got my PhD, which the purpose was not only to do further investigation on the subject, but also to inform. In 1989, we had a sort of a reach out, information outreach project to notify the government, members of the Senate Arms Committee, UN representatives, White House, various, so it must have been about 25, 30 places we sent out by mail information about the superwave theory. That in those days we were armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons, and we were warning that if a superwave happened to arrive, not to launch, because it would produce an EMP effect similar to a nuclear weapon and could be mistaken. And we got some favorable responses back from a few of the ambassadors and so on. Then I've been on a number of shows, including Art Bell's show and a lot of well-known shows, done conference presentations, all trying to get this word out. The book more on the superwave theory, it's called Earth Under Fire. Also, I developed physics theory actually I started the physics theory before I got into the superwave theory. And that was based on my systems of experience. I started looking at the whole universe in terms of systems. That's why I chose going for a PhD in the field. And nobody had applied systems theory to physics, and that was what my theory was doing, is applying it to the subquantum level, sort of to explain the origin of matter and energy. And it was postulating an ether that behaves like an open system. It's sort of like a flux, continual flux. So if this flux were to diminish the slightest at this moment, the computer screen in front of you would dematerialize, as would you and the table and your whole physical universe. So it's something opposed to the Big Bang theory. It's a physics where you realize you have to be thankful every day that we maintaining that the existence is maintained for us. And also, it's more of a spiritual view that the universe is something divine. You know, even at the etheric level, it might have actually consciousness to it, and that there is a beyond. The standard view views the physical universe as sort of self-contained, like a closed system. But when you start viewing it as an open system, you realize there's a beyond, like, what is this flux sustaining us? Where does it come from? What is energizing it? And could, for example, this etheric flux, which we have no way to measure it directly, it's just by assuming it, like the subquantum kinetics theory that made these assumptions back when I published it was in 1985, has so far made 14 predictions that have been verified, which is compared to relativity, which only made 4 predictions. The thing is, it makes, whereas Einstein's theory focused like on gravitation, let's say, and there were just so many things that he could predict: the gravitational time dilation, the gravitational redshift, the bending of light, you know. Whereas subquantum kinetics touches all aspects of physics. So there were many, many predictions coming out on all aspects, including technologies that will affect the future of space propulsion. It's the only theory that I know of that's predicted electrogravitic connections, what Einstein was trying to do to unify electricity and gravitation. Subquantum kinetics, it just drops out automatically from the whole approach. It is a beautiful approach. It's elegant. It's unified. Whereas the standard approach in physics has been to you look at something and you do an experiment and you create a theory and you're only looking at one aspect of reality. And then somebody else comes along, does another experiment. So you have all these theories. Yeah. And they end up one doesn't seem to involve the other. And then they expect some mathematician to come along and make a unified field theory, so to sew everything together. But what you really have is a patchwork quilt, and which you sweep a lot of things under the rug or under the quilt so you don't see them. The contradictions, physics is full of contradictions. I mean, so you could have a field day with physics. Whereas subquantum kinetics begins at the subquantum level, and you make a postulate about the nature of the ether reactions. You know, it's not a simple ether. It's one that has many reacting components. An ether like this was proposed by Mendeleev, the guy who talked about the genetics of plants and mutations. But he also had an ether theory with this idea that there were reactions going on. And then there was a Chinese guy 150 years ago in China who proposed this idea of a reacting ether. But in those days, they didn't have computers, you know. It wasn't until Prigogine, who got the Nobel Prize in physics for the idea of talking about open systems and non-equilibrium thermodynamics. And his group were people who developed this brusillator and simulated it with reaction systems. And that's what sort of inspired me to do subquantum kinetics. I actually took their model, I tweaked it. I mean, this didn't happen instantly. I was trying to toy with the model to make it physically realistic because their version wasn't. You needed a version where the ether or the reaction system, it's called a reaction diffusion system, would create what we call dissipative soliton. It's like a bunched field that could represent a subatomic particle. Whereas theirs, the field was all over the place. It would create structure, but it was of infinite extent. So one day I came up with model G, which I added a third variable, G, which represents the gravitational field, and was able to, at least in my head, it was creating particles. I was able to simulate this sort of in my head, sort of taking what the simulations were done in the brusillator and extrapolating what would they be like with this third variable. And I published Subquantum Kinetics book on that, and also the previous, the main papers, which were published in the International Journal of General Systems in 1985. There are 3 papers, and they decided to make a special issue. They figured, well, it's so many papers, so we'll devote it just to that, and which was very nice. And see, I have, here it is. This is the original publication, you see. And the book has gone through 4 editions. You have the 4th edition is ebook, and I'm now updating it for the 5th edition, adding a lot of new stuff. And so the approach it takes, you postulate about the reaction, like model G is one postulate of how reaction could be. You could come up with other versions, alternate versions. But it's sort of like theorizing about the genetic code of the universe, is a way to put it. Because what happens, it's like at the underlying level where you don't see what's going on. It's what I call the implicit order. It's sort of the reactions that happen to be going on. And from that develops the explicit order, the idea that the ether can become inhomogeneously distributed to produce particle-like structures. And so it turns out the nature of the explicit order, which we observe as a physical world, depends on the implicit order, what assumptions you make for the reactions.
It's like,
and other people, like the fellow who originated Mathematica, had thought that the future of physics would go in this direction, where you'd be making assumptions at a subquantum level about some sort of mathematics, and out of that would come everything. Well, we were the first. I was the first to make this proposal, and happened to strike on one that works, apparently, because it's made so many predictions have come out of it and have become confirmed. So, by that approach, you have the whole. It's a whole. It applies to so many areas, and yet it all emerges from the same basic equations. Everything comes out as corollary, so to speak. So it's all automatically unified from the beginning.
It seems like it's a genotype versus phenotype, kind of the implicit like.
Yeah, the implicit and explicit would be like the genotype and phenotype. Right?
Yeah.
No, it's actually a very biological approach. It postulates open systems, which we are open systems. All biology is based on the open system concept. Mm-hmm. It's only physics was the only one out of all the fields, like the open system concept, even went into business organization theory. That's where I first learned about it when I was at business school. And all of what Ludwig von Berlanti had done. He was the originator of this open system approach and systems theory called the general system theory, which everyone should really get into it. It's a sort of a philosophical approach, but also a scientific approach to viewing everything. I lost my train of thought, but
it doesn't matter. That's why I tell everyone there needs to be no structure on this podcast. What you said about the ether, this sort of flux where it comes from, I've been meditating every day for about 13 years, and I meditate before each podcast. I did it in college to kind of stay sane. When I was taking courses, it helps me in the worst times of my life, helps me in good times. Mostly just helps me collect my mind. To me, it's meditating every day. To me, is just something as like regular as like taking a shower or brushing my teeth. It's mental hygiene for me. I just got to do it for 20 minutes a day, just kind of get everything level. And it's and I was meditating before this podcast, and every once in a while I'll have this kind of, not all meditations are the same, and it's very rarely, I don't know, maybe a couple times a year, that I have this kind of coming to moment where you're just sitting there focusing on the self, on consciousness, on existence, on being. And it's almost like boiling down a metal until you get an element, and then you just can't go further. You're just sitting there, and it's, why is anything? You're not thinking about planets and stars and biology and the economy and war, and it's just that very basic, like, indivisible, why is there anything? And I get the same sensation every time I've experienced this, going back, like I said, once or twice a year for the last 13 years, is it's just joy and gratitude. You go, oh, I am. You're like, I am here. You can get caught up so much in the, got to do laundry, and I got to, I was eating pistachios last night, and I got shells all over my kitchen. I got to clean that tonight, and, doing X, Y, and Z. And versus you kind of get down to the basics, and it's, oh, I am. And that's so wonderful. And I think it's interesting that I just had that, and then I'm talking to you, and you're talking about it comes from a stance of gratitude, where you're like, why is this? What's running this thing, right? You can look at a computer, and I'm like, here's the computer, and this little universe exists on the computer. There's Dr. LaViolette, there's me, and we're right here. But I can see the power cable, and I'm like, okay, well, I can unplug that. Well, then what's behind the power cable? Well, it goes to the outlet. Well, where's the outlet go? And you can always step outside of a bigger and bigger thing, but eventually, like, what is outside of isness? And it's you can't know, and it's a kind of from a point of gratitude. I mean, it's really eventually you come to the conclusion where you just go, I don't know what it is, but you go, I'm thankful for it. And it's that's not the most scientific take on it, but I thought it was fascinating that you said that, because it kind of syncs up with that. It feels, it's in a way, it's like a unifying thing. You go, I don't know what it is, I don't know where it's going, I don't know the purpose of it, but it's pretty cool. And it's beautiful.
Yeah. So the open system idea gives the idea that there is a beyond, beyond the physical. So it gets you away from the positivist view, which sort of gripped physics, more into expanding your consciousness and imagining, using your imagination. And like, for example, where does this ether flux come from? So imagine that it might be a fountain. There's a fountain in the courtyard of some higher dimensional existence.
Sure.
And this water is flowing, making a little current. And that current is generating our whole physical universe, as well as other physical universes that might be parallel universes in that current. And then you might ask, okay, so there might even be beings in that courtyard and castle or whatever, and environment to that's beyond in terms of expanse, and we are just this little current. And so where does that come from, you might ask? So what is generating that reality? And so on and on. I don't know if you've seen the movie Never Ending Story. Mm-hmm. So that was very deep philosophical concept they were presenting. It's for children, but it's the idea that our minds are generating a fantasy world. And as long as we believe in that and continue to give it energy, fantasy world exists. And as soon as people start believing just in reality, that starts to disappear. And so the main character in the book was saving that from disappearing by continuing to believe,
I'm 100% behind that notion.
So you just imagine that at every level, where we come from, another level of existence, where does that come from? And it's an ad infinitum.
Yeah.
And you can say that's what God is
yes.
That entire immensity that we can never understand. We can understand only this, that must be an ether to explain this. And you can easily disprove the general relativity view. I mean, because experiments have been done that have established ether, wind, measurements, and so on.
It's kind of like what the philosopher Alan Watts said about meditating and the ad infinitum. It's like there are burglars on the first story of a skyscraper, and then the cops come in. The burglars go to the second floor, and the cops are on the first floor, so they run up to the second, and then the burglars run up to the third. But there's no roof. They just go forever. And that's God. It's just, if you can imagine it, it just keeps going and going and going. And I'm a huge believer in that, and I have people poke fun at me. I'm 31 years old now. I graduated college in 2013. I got accepted to medical school. I was a hardcore materialist, reductionist. It's just physics and particles, and it's the four physical forces, and it's just atoms and subcontinents go bouncing around, and it creates proteins. The proteins bind to helices, and it's just and I just broke it down into it's nothing special. And in the pinnacle of arrogance, I would then explain away consciousness as a side effect. Like if you rolled a boulder down a hill of snow and it pushed snow on either side, I said that's what the consciousness was. It's just this little offshoot. But, as time has gone on, I tend to think that it's not only is it not insignificant, I think it's the core of everything. It's if you can imagine it, then it can exist. Like what else would God be? What would parallel universes be? Like if it doesn't exist, it's because you haven't thought about it. Like it's you can never put it down on a piece of paper and say it's true. But
and what you're expressing is sort of, I think, the panentheist concept which means that the belief that God is in the universe, as opposed to the universe being something separate from God that He created.
Yes.
And I think the Catholic view is that it's separate.
Yes.
But I'm Orthodox, and the Orthodox believe God is also in the universe, as do the Buddhists and the Native American Indians, shamans, and probably you find this belief very, very common. Probably, actually, most of the people in the world have that view. I created a video called Parthenogenesis. That's a big word, means virgin birth, which is a concept you find not only in the Christian religion, but also in the ancient Egyptian, how Horus was born from Osiris and Isis. It was about like a hugging process she did. There was no sexual organ involved. That was missing.
Yeah.
And it was the whole thing is symbolic. I've written a book called Genesis of the Cosmos, showing that all the main concepts of this physics are encoded symbolically in the ancient creation myths, like the Egyptian, the Babylonian, the ancient Greek, the I Ching, and you find it also in the Tarot. The first 11 arcana of the Tarot are encoding this as a secret science. And the Tarot came through Egypt. It used to be, they believe, the frescoes in the initiation chamber, that they initiate the new priests. They were supposed to learn this principles of the universe, basically. You also find it in the zodiac. So here the zodiac is showing the physics displayed around the heavens, which is very appropriate because it's like explaining how all this was born. The people that did this were not only scientists, but artists at the highest extent. Brilliant. I mean, elegant, brilliant. I mean, when you really get into it, it blows your mind. A lot of my work, I've had one foot in science, but also in the mystical areas. I get a lot of my information, ESP or whatever, from higher levels.
That's what Tesla used
guidance.
to say, right?
Yeah, I was on a different path. I had a guy that you imagine like Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars when he appears in the spirit form speaks to Luke. I had sort of a monk-like figure that almost I could imagine was there to keep me on the path, because I wanted to go out and have a good time just like everyone else and party and meet ladies. I was single in those days. Yeah. And the message I got was, you can struggle all you want, but you will not be able to, we will not let you leave the path. It was that important. And so I didn't understand at that age what this whole thing was that I was doing, because I just begun to, at that time I hadn't even formulated subquantum kinetics. I was viewing the universe as a flux at that time and developing the basics of system theory, which I later discovered had already been developed and I didn't need to do it myself. But as time went on and I saw where all this led and how it made, this physics made so many predictions, like in the beginning, you sort of doubt your own work. You can't really brag about it. But heck, after it's made 12 to 14 predictions, you kick yourself that you aren't more vocal about it, because so many people are out there really proselytizing bullshit. BS.
No, you can say.
You want to cut that out?
No, you can say. You can say whatever the fuck you want, man. This is my podcast. It's me and me. It's a one-man team. I'm the producer, the owner, the editor.
YouTube will take you off for that.
No. They'll take you off if you discuss vaccine. Actually, I don't know. They're cutting on language. I don't know. I don't know. Fuck you, YouTube. We're gonna talk about whatever we want.
So And you later realize how important it was, what you're developing, as well as the superwave theory. And my father wanted me to be taking a normal path, get work, so I get financially secure. But as he got into subquantum kinetics more and more, he became a believer. And it was like he was my first student, so to speak. We would, like the father and son playing ball together, we would just get into this other world, so to speak. Nobody else was in it because nobody knew about subquantum kinetics at that time. And now there's thousands of people who, just as growing and growing the number of people that read the literature on subquantum kinetics.
It's, I don't have an exact...
And you came to it through my book, Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, right?
Yes. And for everybody listening...
Because it has application to space propulsion.
For everybody listening, I will put all those books and the links in the description. But yeah,
it's whether it's subquantum kinetics or whether it's meditation, there does seem to be. I remember the first time it dawned on me that this maybe wasn't like a fluke. It was like, I think it was 2011, or maybe fall 2010. I'd only been meditating for like 2 years at that point, and I was still very much in the mindset of this is just, I use it as a tool. I was like, oh, I find that, it's like if a psychopath was empathetic, like he would be using that as a tool, like, oh, I gain people's trusts. I was looking at meditation as like, oh, it's this peaceful, blissful thing. I could use this to study more so I can get a medical school. It was very, right? It's splitting an atom, and instead of going, we can power the world, going, let's nuke the people we don't like. And it's like, oh, no, you're so close. But I remember I had to read, I was a sophomore in college, so it was fall 2010. And it was Religions of the World, and one of the things I had to read was like an excerpt from like the Bhagavad Gita, and I kind of went off and did more than I had to for school, and I actually started reading the actual text. And there was one thing about talking about meditation, and it was, obviously it's been translated and passed down 1,000 times, so who knows what the original was, but it was, it was like find a place like not too high and not too low. It was like a deerskin mat on top of hay, sit cross-legged and close your eyes and just go inwards. Like, you don't need a teacher, you don't need a method, just go in. And it was like, you'll discover feelings, and behind feelings are like emotions, and behind emotions are opinions, and behind opinions are beliefs. Behind beliefs is identity, behind identity is ego, and behind ego is the I. And and the I is the self, and there's nothing beneath the self. And I was like, finally, somebody gets it. And I'm kind of embarrassed to say, I had no idea what the Bhagavad Gita was. I thought it was like a novel written like that year or something. And I went and looked it up, and I was like, oh, this is thousands of years
old.
And then you go, oh, this is like someone in ancient Egypt going, when you pick something up and drop it, it goes down, versus like Newton doing it, or versus you and I doing it. And you go, oh, there's this intrinsic thing that it's like math. It's an invention. It's not an invention. It's a discovery. People can discover the wheel on every continent in different millennia. And that was the first time that I was like, oh, this is something that other people across millennia have discovered. Like, you go inwards and you find the source of like imagination and joy and bliss, and you visualize these things. I mean, I think I've always pointed it out. I think this podcast is a perfect example. I have a biology degree. I barely know how to use technology. December 12th, 2019, on a laptop, I started this podcast above my parents' garage. And that was episode 1. This is episode 538. Now I have a microphone, sound panels, professional camera, lighting. I'm talking to you. I've talked to Mike Durant, the Black Hawk Down pilot. I talked to Dr. Robert Malone, the inventor of the mRNA vaccine. Howard Bloom, Michael Jackson's publicist. I've talked to Charlie Duke, who walked on the moon, Apollo 16. And I kind of, every once in a while, I have to step back and look at it. And even you, I'm talking to you right now. I've listened to your lecture so many times, and then it's like I sort of reach through the screen, and it's like now it's like watching a movie and then meeting the actual like actor or something. Like, I've listened to your lecture so many times that now I'm talking to you. And at a certain, sure, you can just kind of go, oh, it's good old-fashioned elbow grease. You roll up the sleeves and you get those neurons sweating and you work hard. But man, something is like, another part of me is like, is there something to subquantum kinetics, or is it just meditation? What is it? There seems to be some sort of like field that you can go into and truly, for unfortunately using kind of like a new age term, it seems like you can manifest just about anything. And if you acknowledge that notion as at least possible, I mean,
people that can materialize things, even
the
magicians.
It's, you start to look at it and you're like, wait, this completely turns everything upside down and vaporizes it. Like all preconceived notions. I don't even know where I'm going with this rant anymore, but yeah, so that's whether it's you and your dad sort of discovering this world,
I do agree. There's this entire
you look at everything differently. I mean,
everything.
Physics has so many negatives in it, like
Yeah.
black holes that are going to swallow you. Or
You're gonna die. The darkness
Big
will
Bang,
swallow you.
very explosive thing.
The heat death of the universe. Like it's
Yeah, exactly.
doom and gloom.
Very depressing.
Yeah.
And you don't find that in subquantum kinetics. And in fact, it has implications directly for our future right now, where there's efforts to bring free energy to make it acceptable. So, physicists say, oh, that's impossible. And then they might lock the guy up if claiming he's a charlatan or something because it doesn't agree with physics. Fortunately, that extreme view has diminished, but we used to have it. And now I know of several devices that are about ready to come out. But within subquantum kinetics, this is what you'd expect, because we actually live the whole galaxy, and the galaxy, our neighboring galaxies, are in a region of energy creation. In other words, energy comes into being on itself, on its own, so spontaneously. Very small rate. I mean, we're talking about 10 orders of magnitude below what you can see in the laboratory. So it's not going to affect the laws of physics that they claim. But it is important at cosmological distances. And the theory, subquantum kinetics predicts that, for example, light should lose energy as it travels through intergalactic space. It has to do with the gravity field. Out there, the gravity, you're away from gravity wells, your gravity potential is high, and it turns out the reaction system that runs everything there is what you call subcritical. It's like a reactor being subcritical, that things tend to dampen out. So light loses energy, and it actually does that in quantum jumps, little jumps they call and whereas in the regions of gravity wells around galaxy clusters or superclusters, and we're in one galaxy cluster. In the galaxy itself, you have the opposite. You have supercritical conditions, so energy amplifies slowly. And when you realize that, it opens the door for the possibility of free energy. Plus, all these, if you read The Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion, it explains the electrogravitic effect. And you can reverse engineer a lot of the secret technologies, UFOs. In 1985, I was beginning to write the chapters that became later my book. And I later went back to that paper. There was one I didn't publish, that section I didn't publish about a UFO design. And turns out the Pius Navy patent about the Tic Tac, sort of equivalent to the Tic Tac, explaining how it worked, they patented it. It turned out that was my idea back then in 1985. And I talked about this in a few of the lectures that are on my site. I've been trying to get in touch with the fellow who wrote the patent to see if I can interest him if he's not aware of subquantum kinetics, because it explains what he's done a lot clearer fashion rather than using the jargon of standard physics. But if you want, we can talk a little about the Nausica thruster. I can share screen on a few things.
Sure.
You wanted to talk about Nausica thruster.
Sure. Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to make a point. It's like just thinking about like energy in general, right? I mean, like burning wood to burning coal to burning gas. I mean, even going back to Civil War, go back 160 years. And if you had tried to explain to them like a nuclear reaction, like, hey, in the next, 60 or 80 years, 1945, we're going to take this rock, we're going to enrich it, and then we're going to put, a spherical lens of explosives around it. And then this, the weight of $1 of mass will be converted to energy and will vaporize the city.
And then 6 years after that, we're going to hold that reaction together for 1/100 millionth of a second longer, and we're going to make the explosion 1,000 times stronger. I mean, they look at you like you're high. But that was just the last 160 years, from like coal-powered like freight trains to thermonuclear weapons on tips of missiles. I mean, you have to use a little humility and go, what does the next 100 years hold? Like, truly unlimited energy. But let's jump to the Nausica superconducting thruster. I'm not gonna lie, I'm terrible at using screen share. I need to figure this out. There we go. So I think I just allowed you to. Okay, yeah.
Oh, so you're seeing my screen now?
I do not.
I have to do that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, share screen. Okay, you are sharing.
Beautiful.
Screen.
Okay, now yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, I'll show you a few videos. The version 1 of this thruster, Nausica's thruster, I heard about this in 2012 originally. And here's a video where it's being tested at Athens University. We have a number of physicists observing it. And that's all it is, that little thing. It's a fit in your hand, so small. And it's not going to put much thrust, as you see. It's just enough to move that line, that pendulum, off plumb. And it's you see, it swings back and forth because it sort of overshoots. But it always goes to one side, to the left. And that little thrust can get you to Mars in 5 days if you have enough of those on your thruster. It has the highest thrust to mass ratio of anything that's been developed so far. So it's nothing to sneeze about. Yeah. It won't get you off the ground, but it has quite amazing implications. I'll show you something in a minute. Here, you can also put it in a box in case you think that it's due to air currents. So it's completely in the box. And liquid nitrogen is in there. It works at liquid nitrogen temperature since it's superconductor. There's Dr. Nausica closing it.
Okay.
Made from IBCO, superconductor.
And so the idea is that in space where there's no air resistance, that little amount of, like a xenon ion thruster, at first you go, what is it? It's just, well, when there's zero opposing forces, it gets cooking. It gets fast.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, here's my website, paper archive.
I'll put that in the description for everybody watching.
Starburstfound.org. You just go to the archive, this tab here, and they're free downloads.
Okay.
Let's see what else here. This is his second version we can talk about. I wanted to talk about the first version here. So what you can do, you go to my website. I'll open this, and you go, it's called Sphinx Stargate. Go through a Stargate. And you'll see some political postings too. Sort of a patriot type of.
Hey man, I did an episode yesterday with some Delta Force guys. I have on. As you can see by the flag, to quote Elon Musk, I am nauseatingly patriotic. There's nothing bad about that.
So I put Nausica in the search engine,
okay,
and pull up a whole bunch of different things. Now for the version 1. Go down here. This should be the one to look at. And I think that a lot of these ideas that you saw in the lecture, especially here's the ion thruster, comparing it to it. Here's the Nausica thruster. So all it is IBCO, superconducting nozzle, basically, with a magnet in its throat. And so the magnet's producing field lines that go around this way. And the ones out here, as they come out here, fan out, they're very weak. So the superconductor has the property that it doesn't let magnetic field lines penetrate through its surface. So they end up that the magnetic field ends up instead exerting a force on that surface because it can't get in.
Oh.
Whereas the force here is very weak, but in here in the throat, the field lines are very strong, so you get very strong forces. So if you do a study of the forces, you see that you'll get, because it's shaped like a nozzle, you end up getting a forward thrust in this direction. So the weight, it's only 118 grams, this version. It works at 77 Kelvin, liquid nitrogen temperature, produces about 2% G, the Earth's acceleration, using a 1 Tesla field magnet. So neodymium, so if you can put it in space, you put up a sun shield, you can get temperatures down to 40 or so, well below the 77. And its thrust will increase as you go at lower temperatures. So here's the alternative is the xenon ion thruster that NASA has developed, which puts out ions of xenon. You can see comparison, the size comparison, 30 centimeters versus 5 centimeter diameter for this little thing. And a difference of weight also. So if you compare to the Dawn spacecraft, it uses an ion thruster. We're supposed to go out to explore beyond Mars, I think. So thruster size 30 centimeters for the ion thruster versus 5 centimeters for Nausica's. The propellant power source mass, or the thruster, including the thruster. If you include thruster and propellant, it's 500 kilograms, so half a ton, basically. Whereas Nausica's is 120 grams. It's not even a kilogram, it's a fraction. The thrust, here you get 92 millinewtons. He gets only 21 millinewtons, but the important thing is the thrust to mass ratio, thrust to weight ratio. And his is 1,000 times greater, you see. And the ion thruster, it consumes 2.3 kilowatts. Nausica's thruster doesn't consume anything. It violates the first law of thermodynamics, essentially. So the thrust to power ratio is infinite for the Nausica's thruster. And let's see, I didn't have anything further on that in this. So if you go into the MySpace conference lecture, I give some more diagrams. So we have that one thruster. We loaned it to somebody, and he never returned it. We kept asking for it back. Claims, we haven't had time to look it over.
What a bum.
Nausica's has been kind enough not to do a court suit against the guy, but he came out with a second version, was this, which was a coil version, totally different, but again, superconducting coil, which is, instead of having the sides parallel to each other, they're slanted. So he theorized that.
Would that increase its efficiency, or I guess overall thrust?
Well, he's trying to develop a thrust. So according to the right-hand rule, and if you study electrical engineering and physics, it's what's called the Lorentz Force. That you have the direction of electric current, the direction of the magnetic field. So you should create a force perpendicular to those, and that's what makes an electric motor go. So he was doing the same thing here. So you got the current going around this way through the cross section. It creates a magnetic field this way. And so he theorized it would create a force this way, which because it's actually this way, perpendicular, but because it's slanted, you have two force components. You have one that's axial and one that's horizontal. And horizontal ends up canceling out here, but the axial ends up creating a force in this direction. So he expected this would propel itself.
No.
Now, that's if the Lorentz force is correct. But what we found was maybe the Lorentz force is not correct interpretation of this. There's what's also called the Ampere Force, discovered by Ampere back 200 years ago. And his idea is that the force is longitudinal in the direction of the current. So the force, you don't use right-hand rule for that. It's it's trying to cause this coil to expand, but because it's the windings in the coil are trying to expand through this longitudinal force. But you won't get any propulsion if that's what the force is, because they know there is a force trying to expand the coil. And they know it goes according to the square of the current. But both the Ampere force and the Lorentz force go according to the square of the current. And physicists have chosen to ignore Ampere force and say it's Lorentz, assuming maybe the Ampere force is negligible, I don't know, or they don't even know what Ampere force is. So we tested this, we built the coil and tested it, and found we didn't get any thrust. So unfortunately, he invested in a patent on this, thinking, depending on what physicists were saying was true. So it has no application for space propulsion, but it was a beautiful experiment to disprove standard view of physical view. And there's other experiments that have shown the superiority of the Ampere force concept. They have a web page showing some of the experiment we did there. Let's see, I can get rid of this.
Would the Nausica superconducting thruster, would it be enough to get off Earth, or would you need like a conventional solid?
Yeah, the one that you just saw that we were hoping would work would have gotten us off.
But the first one.
He went through third and fourth version, and okay, we saw this. I have them all lined up here to show you guys.
You're fine, man. As you can tell, I don't really have any defined structure to my podcast.
There it is.
So there's nothing. Yeah.
Okay. So here's the coil test that we performed. You see, it's has a slight slope to it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the bath. We hung it like pendulum fashion in the bath. A donor provided. We also did a crowdfunding for this. Some of it we got from people, ordinary people like you, but we had a donor that made up the remainder. Here's Dr. Nausica, and filled this with liquid nitrogen, and no motion, unfortunately.
Well, that's also...
We rewound it just in case it wasn't wound right. We did a second test, a helium test. Even with helium, it didn't show anything.
Well, that's also part of science, though.
Sometimes it was sort of a big disappointment. Now, he's got a fourth version that he's just patented. It's like a U shape. Instead of just being a linear thruster, it's a U shape, and it will propel along the direction the U is pointing. But to wind the shielding on that with flat tape, it's considered special project because they're used to winding just solenoids. And suddenly the price goes up from maybe 10,000, 15,000 to over 100,000. We don't have the funds to do that, so he hasn't tested that yet.
Now, with the first one, though, that one, I mean, you showed it worked. So
yeah.
So if
NASA hasn't taken any interest. We offered to bring it to them, give them a demonstration. They didn't want us to come. And then behind our backs, they thought that they were smart enough, and they would go out and they try to duplicate it and test it, and they didn't get any results. Well, it turns out we didn't tell them everything, how you're supposed to do the test.
Of course not.
And plus, we didn't tell them what material to use. There's all sorts of IBCO materials, and not all of them work.
Well, yeah, you can't give
you don't find out all those things in the patent, you know.
Yeah, my grandma would say when you give someone a recipe, you leave out one ingredient.
Yeah, so their Eagle Works spent a lot of money testing the microwave thruster. You familiar with that?
The reactionless, the EM drive?
Yeah, the EM drive. And the Nausica thruster puts that to shame. I think I did a comparison in that lecture that you saw to the EM drive. So it's really a pity that they wanted to test the EM drive and not the Nausica thruster, and we would be having thrusters to get us to Mars today. Because I mean, you can talk to people till all day, and if they don't think there's something value to it to do a space program, they start manufacturing these, and it doesn't matter. You know, you have the better mousetrap, but people aren't beating the path to your door.
Yeah. If it was some, and I'm talking from as someone who does a podcast in my 700 square foot apartment, it's not like I'm rolling in the money. If someone did manage to, I mean, if you got like an Elon Musk or something, right? If you got a private private individual who also has access to rockets, if you got a Nausica thruster up into, you know, out of the gravity well of Earth, I mean, if you got like 1,000 of them, and you know, you talked about the applications of it, you're right, going to Proxima Centauri or a Retina, or I can't pronounce it, any distant target, right? Go to Pluto in 2 weeks.
Yeah, you could go up to light speed at least. Yeah. If you want to wait long enough.
Yeah. Well,
because the thrust is small.
Yeah.
2%.
Yeah.
But excuse me.
You're quite all right.
That is to remind me of something.
No, you're fine.
We're an hour.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
but you can make a spacecraft, if you figure compared to the space shuttle, something minus all the rockets. So 100-ton craft, and you put a whole, I was saying not only a Nausica thruster, I picked like the Brown thruster, Townsend Brown.
Townsend Brown, yeah.
The conical thruster that he developed that he's done tests on, so we have that data. And just based on the data, we know how much thrust it would produce and how much energy it would take. You have an array of his thrusters, and you could actually run them with solar cells. It takes so little energy, and get to Mars in 5 days. You know, I think I was talking about that in one of my lectures. So, you know, instead of 9 months like they're talking about. We have contacted Elon. I have sent an email or tried to contact Elon Musk. No answer back.
He's pretty untouchable. Can't really get.
You know, how do they know that just one little email out of the millions they get over the year is maybe something that should be of interest to them? You need somebody who's like in between.
Yeah.
And whether he's interested in exotic technologies, I don't know. He seems to be going the rocket approach.
Yeah. You know, I've often thought, like, you know, the real. I think the one thing that grabs people's attention is like fun or like memes, right? That's what kind of gets people behind things. And I've talked to the chief engineer of NASA JPL, Rob Manning. I've talked to friends who worked at NASA building rockets, and we've talked about, like, what if you just, you know, there's often these, well, where are we going and how are we getting there, and then halfway you got to turn it around and slow it down. But what if you just cut all that out? And what if you just made the most simple, bare bones spacecraft, and you just put like a transponder on it, and then you could use the Doppler effect to see how fast and how far it's going, something like Voyager 2, and you just chose a patch of the night sky and just flung it out there with no destination, no end goal, no is it going to slow down and take pictures of a star. No, you just put it in one direction, you just let it rip, and I still look at how far Voyager 2 is. It's just fascinating. It's not doing anything new, but it's sending back just its location. And to me, I think there's something special about just, it's people say, why is there the Burj Khalifa? It's 828 meters high. There's something about just do it just to do it. Why does a car need to accelerate to 60 miles an hour in 0.1 seconds less? Because it's fun. I think if someone could somehow get a Nausica's thruster into orbit out of the gravity well and just point it in a direction and just let it loose, you could just run a website and it'd be like every day it would just be like what its speed is.
We had one guy who was interested for use of satellites. These very small satellites that are
CubeSats.
Miniaturize them so much now.
Yeah, CubeSats.
And he was interested and was willing to. He wanted to get the thruster to test it for himself. This other fellow was hanging on to it. We can't get it back from him. And so nothing we could do right now.
If I ever make money off this podcast in a big way, some Joe Rogan style thing, one of the things I do plan on doing is I want to build a spacecraft the cheapest possible, and I do just want to put it in one direction and just fling it as fast and as far as I can for no other purpose. I mean, it's the same thing when you're a kid and you and your brothers are throwing rocks off of a bridge to make them splash. For no other reason than it's just interesting. I've always wanted to do that. Is just build something, just point it in one direction, Xenon ion thruster or a Nausica's thruster, and unlike the Voyager, where Voyager was taking no, not even that. Just put a transponder on it, point it in one direction, and let her rip, and you could just track it. And every day you could see the speed, you just see how far it is. I think there is something about that appeals to the curious mind. That's just...
Now there's a question whether even with these exotic technologies, if that's what they really use for interstellar travel.
Yeah.
Because you hear about the stargates. At first, when I first heard about it, didn't know whether to believe it or not. You get a lot of testimonials that apparently this is reality, but I don't believe in standard Einsteinian physics, so I don't believe in wormholes and stuff like that they usually use to explain these. But I realized that I could come up with a way of doing it in subquantum kinetics using the idea of quantum entanglement. Where two particles are bonded to each other, even though they're separated in space.
Yeah, instantaneous.
You do something at one place and it immediately responds at the other. And they've measured speeds, superluminal speeds.
Yeah.
And so I developed a kind of quantum entanglement teleportation machine, and explained it would use stuff that they used in the Philadelphia experiment. So it's not something you'd want to play around with.
Yeah.
You'd have to end up dematerializing the body at the one location, and immediately it jumps to the other because of the entanglement. I did present a little of that in my not MUFON, but the Global UFO Conference in Laughlin, Nevada, Mega UFO Conference in February of 2020. I don't know if anyone understood what I was saying, but I'm hoping to write it up in more detail.
You should. It's we've run a little over an hour, so let's wrap this one up. I'll send you an email because I'd love to talk to you again. I'll put the links to all in the description. I'll put the links to all of your work, your books, those lectures, and Hold on, I'm gonna
And mention that we have a donation page on Starburst Foundation.
absolutely.
People can donate through PayPal.
Starburst Foundation. You can donate there, help it keep it running. One second. So I'm going to stop recording, but don't go anywhere. So for everybody listening, Dr. Paul LaViolette, thank you so much for coming on. But
Recording stopped.
Hold on. And